and we are live for another edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside, as always, by my co-host, Andrew Johnson. Johnson, we're down to the final four teams in this year's NBA season. We have two teams in the West, two teams in the East. We're going to break down what happened in the semifinals of both the Eastern and Western Conference, and then preview the Eastern and Western Conference Finals that will start tonight with the Western Conference Finals and will then continue tomorrow night with the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, it was a kind of anticlimactic second round.
Yes.
We spoil alert, we got all the teams right in our last pod. We got the incorrect amount of games for a lot of them, but
Right.
what we expected to happen did happen, and this is what happened. This is what I feel like what America was expecting too of these picks. I happened to get two of them right, one in 7 games, one in 6 games, and I was off by one in the other two. So I feel like I did a pretty good job this second round predicting.
Yeah. I think for me, I'm trying to think. I'm looking at it now. I was up by 2 games in one series, one game, and the rest of the other 3. So almost, but no cigar. But I think the best way to look at, where we're going into the next round is, yes, it was anticlimactic, but there were still some good moments from this semifinals, from this NBA postseason. You mentioned there was a Game 7 that took place last night. You had some thrilling matchups in the Western Conference 2-6 matchup with San Antonio, Minnesota, outside of that final game in Game 6. But I think the best way for us to look at this, Johnson, and to break it down, I think let's start off with the 2 series that first concluded, which was the Sixers and the Knicks, then Thunder and the Lakers, and then we'll round it out with Minnesota and San Antonio, and then the Game 7 that took place last night between Cleveland and Detroit. So let's start off with the Knicks. Couldn't have asked for a better series if you're a Knicks fan, coming off of a tough series with Atlanta, lost 2 games in that series. They ended up dominating them the rest of that series to win the series in 6 games, including that 51-point drubbing in Game 6. And then Philadelphia, coming off a 3-1 deficit against Boston, they come back to win the series in 7 to move on into the second round. And you could tell in Game 1 that they were pretty much exhausted after that first round matchup with Boston. The Knicks dominate them in the first game of this series, winning that one almost by 40 points, a 39-point drubbing from New York in Game 1. Joel Embiid would not play in Game number 2 for Philadelphia. The Knicks did have a bit of a scare in that game against the Sixers, but some clutch shooting from New York down the stretch of that game helped
and
them
Nick,
win.
The only time I'm going to interject
Yes.
during this this breakdown, was this point, because I think Game 2, the first half officiating was ridiculous.
Yes.
6 fouls on your centers in the first 15, 16 minutes of game time was ridiculous.
If I remember correctly, I don't think the Knicks got a foul called for them until maybe the 2-minute mark of the first half.
It was absolutely insane, one-sided officiating, and I forget the name of the ref, but it was one of the usual suspects where the Knicks have approximately a 60% win ratio over the last.
Is Zach, right?
It might be Zach Zarba. Yeah, I think it was Zach Zarba. Yeah, it was Zach Zarba, now that you mentioned it. We've won 60% of our games over the last 5 years, but when this guy seems to ref our games, we only win 30% of the time.
Yeah.
That is a massive outlier. I don't care. And he was just voted by all these teams as such a great officiant. I don't see it. Any game I've turned this guy I've turned out this guy in it has been horrendous. But that's gonna be where I'm gonna end my rant here.
That's fair. No, I mean, listen, this was, unfortunately for Philadelphia, this was the closest chance they had of winning any game in this series, and free throw shooting definitely played a factor into that. They got some really good bench minutes as well from just 3 of their bench players, but they had to play a lot of their stars, a lot of minutes in this game. Maxey played almost the entire game. He only sat for a minute. Paul George played 43 minutes. Kelly Oubre played 40 minutes. Edgecombe played 40 minutes. And that's where I felt like the exhaustion again played in a factor of this one, because the Sixers only scored 12 points in the fourth quarter. They really just could not make any shots down the stretch of this game. And that really, effectively cost them this second game two against the Knicks, losing that one 108 to 102. The Knicks did lose OG Anunoby in this game, which was a big loss in this game because he's been dominant for the Knicks this entire postseason so far. So they would not have Anunoby for the final two games of this series. Game three was pretty much almost similar to what happened in game two, the way it started. Back and forth affair. The Knicks had a big second quarter to take the lead going into halftime. Was again back and forth in the third quarter. And then it felt like towards the end of that game, the Knicks just started to make every single shot. And Philadelphia, again, felt like the exhaustion got to them at the end of that game. They could not make anything going. They did have Embiid come back in the starting lineup, but it was not going to help them in this game. The Knicks winning game three, 108 to 94. And then Johnson, almost somewhat similar to what we saw happen in the first round for the Knicks, the game clinching matchup for them in game number four. They just started off red hot and they just did not put their foot off the gas. They score 144 points against the Sixers in game number four, including a 43-point first quarter, a 41-point third quarter, and a big reason why was the replacement for OG Anunoby, Deuce McBride. Fantastic performance from him in the starting lineup for the Knicks in this game. He goes 7 of 10 from the field, 7 of 9 from the three-point line. It felt like all of those three-pointers came in the first half. The Knicks, as a team, shot 57% from the three-point line as well. They dominated Roll Philadelphia in this series. They move on to the Eastern Conference Finals for the second straight season. And the good news is, with the long layover rest that they've had, they will get OG Anunoby back for the Eastern Conference Finals in their next matchup.
MSG, not East, Joel Embiid, but MSG Southwest.
Yeah.
It was a Knicks fan takeover for 2 days, and if I was a Philadelphia sports fan, I would be embarrassed.
Yeah.
Listen, you could say, hey, I know we're going to lose this, but you still have to show some pride. This was a fan base that just gave up.
Yeah, I mean, it got to the point where, Eagle fans are now clamoring for the Eagles to do something against the Giants this upcoming NFL season because of how badly this was of a takeover from the Knicks fans in this series. Like, it got to that extent.
Yeah, no, it was bad. Like, it was, I can't remember a team that suffered a home court disadvantage like this. Maybe the Nets, when they play the Knicks during the regular season.
Yeah.
Maybe the Clippers, when they play the Warriors at their complete height, and maybe the Lakers with the same idea, but it wasn't this bad. You would at least have 50% Clipper fans, 50% Laker fans when they were struggling too. This felt like it was a 70-30 crowd. And let alone not a regular season game in, let's say, in January. This was playoff basketball.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and they
Philadelphia as a sports city can listen, it's clearly still a sports town, but it takes a hit to their credibility here.
Oh, 1,000%. And I think that's the damning part for them is that, this is a city that, as much as I don't like it, is built on rich tradition from their sports teams. The Phillies have had some success over the years. The Eagles, as of recent, have had their success. Philadelphia, the 76ers wise, have been a synonymous basketball team, but they haven't had the championship, success that they would hope for. And I think now you look at this in Philadelphia's perspective, because obviously we'll talk about the Knicks when we break down the Eastern Conference Finals, but the Sixers are just in a weird spot. Daryl Morey now is parted ways with the team, so they now look for a new basketball head of operations. And I think it's really going to come down to what can this team even do, because there's not much, flexibility on this roster. Joel Embiid's contract extension is going to kick in this upcoming season. You have, Maxey is an emerging star for this team, of course. Who knows what you have out of Edgecombe? He had some ups and downs this season, but he looks to be a solid player for the most part.
Nick, here's my question to you.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you have a Sixers, the Clippers are looking to trade that number 5 overall pick. Is the number 5 overall pick worth Joel Embiid in the Clippers' current state right now?
I don't think it is.
What do you think? You have to clearly trade Embiid, but what do you think fair value for Joel Embiid is at this point?
It's tough because the injuries.
I really don't know.
the injuries are just a damning part of his career. And keep in mind, he's 32 years old now, so like he is getting towards the he's getting up there in age. And I think it's what a 3-year extension he's got coming up right now.
Yeah,
That's coming
almost
with
$200
this.
million.
So you're going to be paying until he's 35 years old, which is that going to be worth, what is it, 50, 60 mil per year? Is that really worth the top 5 overall pick? I don't think so whatsoever. And I'm looking at it right now. You have the cap hit next year will be 57 mil, then it's 62 mil the year after, and then 67 mil the year after that. That is a lot of money to pay for a guy like that. I'm not saying he's not worth a first round pick, but I'm not trading a
I don't think
lottery
you
pick
think
to get him.
yeah, exact. So that's why. So like if I were the 76ers, I would look to trade Embiid, get the money off. I would look to trade Paul George too, and just build around your young stars. Start anew. Start fresh right here. If you can get even future first round picks, which you think can be a lottery pick, but if I would trade, oh god, this is such a deep draft. If you could make it work where you have the salary expiring next year, you have to take a look at even picks between at the 10 and 11 spot, because when you think about it, you have Maxi, right? You have Edgecombe. That's your future backcourt. At picks like 8, 9, or 10, you could get a guy like Nate Ament from Tennessee, who is an explosive forward who would fit in well there. He shoots the ball well. He's a great athlete, and he has a lot of upside. He could really fit well into that young core. You can get a guy like Laxell Lendenberg too, be your future power forward. Like there's a lot of options here deep in this draft. So I don't know what they're gonna do, but it's gonna be really interesting because for people saying the process is dead, the process does not die until Joel Embiid has been traded.
Is gone,
But
yeah.
it's on life support right now.
Yeah, I think the problem is you look at the draft itself. I'm sure we'll talk about the draft lottery a little bit later on after we finish our first round updates because we did have the lottery take place as well, which is crazy to think. But since the last time we talked, the lottery hadn't taken place. We know who's going to be the team drafting number one overall and the rest of it. And you look at those teams down in order, it's like what team would really want to take the flyer at Embiid because you're still looking at a championship window for yourself. Is that one of the teams at the end of the lottery? Like, is it a team like, I don't know, you look at maybe Golden State, but they don't really have cap situations that could do it. Milwaukee, we don't know what's going on with them and Giannis Antetokounmpo. So, like, they wouldn't do that. They're probably going to be in a full-on reset soon. Dallas, I don't think it would make much sense. I don't think it really makes sense for them to do that either. I don't really see a team right now that has a
I could be
pick.
partners with them. Yeah.
Right. Like it's really you're really trying to think of who could that partner be, and I don't really see one at the current moment. I think if you're the Sixers, unfortunately, you're just kind of stuck with it. And the problem for this is that you mentioned Paul George's contract right now is kicking. You have Embiid's contract kicking in. You just paid Maxey recently, and you also have to keep in mind you're going to have Kelly Oubre, who was a star for you this season. He's going to be a free agent. Andre Drummond, who got some big minutes in the playoffs, he's a free agent. Quentin Grimes got some big minutes. He's also a free agent. So you're losing potentially a couple of big players from your bench slash starting lineup, which without much cap flexibility, what can you possibly do in in free agency? The Sixers, keep in mind, don't have their pick this year. They don't have it. It's in OKC's hands. So they only have the 22nd overall pick from Houston, and that's about it.
Which is fine. That's where they'd be picking anyway, so it's not like
Right.
it's the end of the world here.
Yeah, you can maybe package a player with that pick to try to trade up and maybe get one of those guys you mentioned before. Maybe that's what you do. Problem is, I don't know who you package with at this point because you don't really have much to package with at this rate. So I think you're at the point where you're just stuck with Embiid's contract. I don't think there's much you can do just because there's
Crazy
so
that this
much
is a
money.
talking point where this guy won an MVP, even though I said it was a Mickey Mouse MVP. It was a how can I say this? It was a sympathy MVP. It's still an MVP nevertheless.
And hey, people are saying that might be the same case with this year's MVP. That also happened. Took place last night. Um, but that's also because of a lot of players getting injured this season that were in MVP consideration, and they had to pick someone. I think at that rate to win it. So yeah, Philadelphia's got a very interesting offseason upcoming. Not sure exactly where they're going to be going from here. Um, and they kind of have a somewhat similar parallel to, I don't want to say similar, but this other team that we're going to be talking about also has a very interesting offseason coming up, and that's the Los Angeles Lakers. They got swept in the second round by the Oklahoma City Thunder. Not really surprising. I thought maybe the Lakers would take one of these games, but the first three games, they just had no fight in them whatsoever. Game four, they had some fight at least towards the end, had a chance to win that fourth game. But really, what it came down to, Johnson, is that they still were without Luka Doncic, who'd missed the entire first round of the playoffs. He missed the entire second round of the playoffs, and they get knocked out in 4 games by the defending NBA champions in OKC. The Thunder move on to the conference finals once again. And now the Lakers go into an offseason with a lot of questions, especially the biggest one is what is LeBron James going to do? Is he going to retire? Is he going to come back? And if he comes back, is it going to be with the Lakers or somebody else?
Yeah, and I want to point out something with Luka Doncic over here. They said he was going to be, he was questionable for like the last 40 days, pretty much. He was day to day since the beginning of April.
Since he got injured
And
in the game against OKC.
yeah, and it's crazy to think though that like they kind of strung us along because they said it's actually like close to a grade 3, hamstring. This guy's name got dragged through the mud because he's lazy, whatever. He's this one. I don't know. Like it's just like he couldn't do anything. Like
Right.
he physically couldn't play. So like it feels like the league was being lied to here.
Yeah, I think this is a weird offseason because obviously it looks like it's gonna they're gonna be building this team around Luca. That's a no doubter about that. And I think the problem for the Lakers is this: even if LeBron wants to come back, are you willing to bring LeBron back? Is the question I have because
I don't think you do.
you're gonna have to pay him a lot. I don't think LeBron. I don't know if LeBron is going to be at the point where he's going to be willing to take a contract that's not going to harm him, but also in terms is going to help the team build around what they currently have. Because let's face facts. Outside of Luca and LeBron, you had Austin Reeves who had a really bad postseason coming back from that injury. Rui Hachimura arguably was their second best player in this entire postseason, which is really something to say. Um, you don't really have a strong dominant center. DeAndre Ayton showed some flashes, but really struggled mostly in the second round. You don't really have a starting five that can win you a championship at this point. So it really comes down to if they want to bring LeBron back, they probably have to give him a contract that's going to be not only helpful for him, but also helpful for the team that they could get more players outside of LeBron James at free agency. So again, I don't know what LeBron's going to do because this very well could have been his last NBA season. We have no idea if that's the case. But again, if it's not his last NBA year, is he going to come back to the Lakers? It doesn't seem like he would want to leave LA because of the glitz and glamour. But then again, maybe LeBron just wants to win one more ring. And obviously, right now, it doesn't look like the Lakers in this current incarnation that they have. They're not going to win a championship with the current iteration of this team.
Yeah, I think LeBron has to move on. Whether he goes to rumored favorites, the Knicks, Cleveland, he's got to go somewhere, and where I'm not really sure.
If I had to guess, if I'm picking a
He
team,
goes back to Cleveland.
I think Cleveland would be the likely destination because then you could fully end you could fully end it, end your own home state. I agree with you. I think Cleveland probably is the likely destination, and it's going to be interesting because I believe they're gonna have to decide about what happens with James Harden in the offseason. So you're gonna really be deciding about that. But keep in mind, you just traded your former starting point guard to get Harden, so it's like you're kind of in a pickle where you probably need to get him back, and you don't have your draft pick this year outside of the pick from San Antonio, which is the right now the 29th overall pick. So I think if I had to guess, I agree with you. I think he probably goes back to the Cavs. I'm sure you and I will talk a lot more about it when we do a free agency prediction. At some point.
It's also gonna
Not
be
sure.
interesting because like if
We'll
the
talk
Knicks
about
make
that.
it to the finals, right, and they lose, LeBron could be like, they're right there. They're not gonna break up that core for a year. If I come, I could really add to them and so on and so forth. And the same thing can be said with Cleveland. If Cleveland gets there, and let's say they lose to whatever team in 7 games, like it's going to be the same thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think, and that's another thing. It's is LeBron going to be willing to take the big, salary, pay
I
cut?
think he's going to have to because there's no
At this
teams
point,
do
you
not
have
have
to,
money.
right? And no one really wants. And listen, LeBron. Let's just face facts. He had a good postseason for the Lakers. He was pretty. He was arguably the only player that was consistent for them in the entire postseason. The problem is, are you going to be willing to pay a 41, 42-year-old LeBron James about $40 to $50 million?
And it'd have to be a
And
sign and trade. You're not going to give up
right,
assets for him.
right,
You're only going to get 1 year of him, probably.
right. I think undoubtedly next year is his last year. I think it just makes too much sense. No matter what happens, it's probably going to be done next season. I think it's year what? It's next year to year 23 for him.
Yes, it is. And it
Yeah,
would make a lot
I
of
think
sense
it's
for
done for
him to
him.
have a send off tour in Madison Square Garden every single night. I'm not saying that as a season ticket holder at all. No, no, sir.
No bias whatsoever. Yeah, I think for me, if I had to pick a top five of where he goes next year, I would say Cleveland, back to the Lakers, maybe the Knicks. And if I had to round out the top five, it has to be like a big name city. Like he's not going to go to like
He's not going to Sacramento. Sorry, guys.
right.
Sorry, not to burst your bubble, but it's not happening.
Golden State. I think would be a candidate. I think that's been
Yeah, play
rumored
with Draymond and Steph. Like that's interesting, but
that's been
you're not
rumored so many times.
yeah, you're not competing for a championship there.
No, that's just pretty much like the old like
He's
Boston
going there for
Big
vibes.
Three. Like yeah, exactly. It's like something like that. It's like they're older now, but hey, listen, on paper, like these are some of the best players we've seen over the 2010 decades. If I had to pick a fifth team, maybe is Dallas intriguing to you for LeBron?
I think they're still a year off or 2 years
Yeah,
off.
I'm not saying they would win a championship, but
If Dallas won 50 games this year, I would say, okay, yeah, they have some, but they're just young.
yeah,
They're not in to win it yet.
yeah. It'd be funny if they did a KD for LeBron swap in Houston. All for that. I feel like that'd be interesting because Kevin Durant also has a interesting offseason up ahead. I feel like that's going to be something that maybe gets talked about in the offseason. But OKC does the job nonetheless. They are in the Western Conference Finals, and they will take on the San Antonio Spurs, who knocked off the Minnesota Timberwolves in 6 games, winning the final game by 30 points. But before we got there, Johnson, it was a Timberwolves winning game one without Anthony Edwards, a very shocking win to start this series, 104 to 102. And then obviously Edwards would come back in the series, and the Spurs finally, I felt like after game one, everything started to click for them. Wembanyama did not have a good game one. He dominated pretty much the rest of this series for San Antonio. And after game four, the Timberwolves win that game four by 5 points. Of course, the biggest news from that game was Wembanyama got ejected after elbowing Naz Reid. So uncertainty of him playing game five was up there, but let's face facts, he was never going to get suspended for game five. They were never going to do that, especially this late in the season with the series tied at 2. He dominates game five. Spurs dominate that game five as well, winning almost by 30 points. And then they eventually do win by 30 points in game number 6. They really just shot the lights out from the court in game number 6, getting everything really hot started. Julius Randle, unfortunately for us, as former fans of his when he was on the Knicks. I know you're still a fan of him now, but when he was a Knick, he just really had a really rough series, especially in the last 2 games, and especially in this game 6. He goes 1 of 8 from the floor. Anthony Edwards missed 17 shots. McDaniels missed 9 shots. Yeah, there's really not much more you can say about how everything could have possibly went wrong for Minnesota in game number 6. They shot 38% from the field. The Spurs shot near over 50% from the field, almost 50% from the 3-point line. And they are going to the Western Conference Finals. And we've been saying it all year long, Johnson. It felt like at some point it was going to be San Antonio and OKC more than likely as the final 2 teams in the Western Conference. And we're going to get that in this Western Conference Finals that kicks off tonight.
Yeah, so like Nick, what do you do from here now?
Yeah, if you're Minnesota, I don't know. I mentioned at the beginning of the playoffs, if they got first rounded, that maybe Chris Finch goes. I don't think I'd see it now since they got this far and took the Spurs to the limit. But you're in a weird. I think you're just in another weird spot where, like, you have so much money invested into Anthony Edwards. You gave Jaden McDaniels a big contract. You gave Naz Reid a big contract. I think the biggest certainty, and unfortunately, I hate to say this, but I think Julius Randle's probably gone. I just
He's
don't
probably
see.
gone, but I want to point out one thing though.
Yeah,
Even though you guys say, "Oh, he has a history," whatever, not you, but just in general. When Ron
yeah.
Artest elbowed James Harden back in the playoffs 15 years ago, I'm pretty sure he got like a 7-game suspension. It was the exact same play. He looked at him, he wound up, he elbowed him straight in the head.
Was
It was
that
the
was that in
exact
the
same play.
playoffs?
Yeah. I'm
Oh, I thought it was
99%.
at the end of the regular season for some reason.
It
Yeah,
was either
that
at
makes
the
that
end of the
does
regular
check out.
season or it was in the playoffs. But
Yeah,
but he got 7 games.
Yeah,
There's
I get
absolutely
it.
no reason why Victor Wembanyama shouldn't have got. Mitchell Robinson got $50,000 for posting an Instagram story. He doesn't get any fines. He doesn't get any suspensions. But Mitchell Robinson gets a $50K fine for posting a singing hamster
Well,
on his Instagram story.
Well, we all know why, Johnson. We know
Yeah, we know
exactly.
why he did it, though. Like we know
It's all
why,
for the money.
right?
It's all for the money.
No, but it is a crazy that's a crazy sentence, Vel.
No, listen,
No, Wemby should have gotten fined and suspended.
I think I don't know. I think the problem was you could just tell they weren't going to suspend him because of it being this late in the series. Also, I think at that point, Ron Artest obviously wasn't at the peak of his career; he was towards the end of his career. So
Yeah,
the
but
NBA
it's
figured
still
it is what
listen.
it is. Like Wemby does change the entire game. Obviously, he's a
Yeah, but
he's a
listen. He has to
freak.
be punished
reprimanded.
accordingly.
Yeah, he has to be reprimanded for what he did, and I'm pretty sure he got fined. But um, there was. Listen, I think it was 50-50 that day after of would he get suspended or would he not, and for me, I felt like it was maybe 70-30 that he's probably not going to get suspended because I just didn't. It just didn't feel like he was going to, based on how the series being tied. And if you suspend him, then you're pretty much saying to Minnesota, well, here's your ticket to the Western Conference Finals. Don't choke this opportunity away. They want to give both teams a chance, I guess. I don't know. I don't know.
It's craziness to me, but I guess whatever.
Yeah. I think for a final note for Minnesota, I think right now you're looking at Randall probably be gone. Probably DiVincenzo too, because his contract does expire this season. And I don't know if they would bring him back at this current point, especially coming off that big injury. I wouldn't even be surprised if I feel like they have to upgrade from either Reed or Gobert at center. You can't really have both, in my opinion. It's worked for you, but I feel like one of them has to go for you to move on
And
further.
the sad thing about Julius Randle is like he made the Western Conference Finals with this team last year. Like he had a bad series. He was having a decent postseason up until now. Now you ran into the Spurs. They're a better team. It happens.
Right.
You got run out of town after 2 seasons. One of them where it was really good. It was one of their best seasons in franchise history.
I think it comes down to this team's probably going to make upgrades, and I just don't know what I think as of now, Randall's probably the only certainty I think that's going to be upgraded from. I think Timberwolves fans would revolt if he's back on the team this year, but again, one bad series can't really define you for a lot of things. But I'm looking at him, DiVincenzo, and then either Reed or Gobert probably not being on this team next season. I think if Minnesota wants to get further on, they have to make some kind of change. I don't know what it would be, but they have to make some kind of change if they want to move further, because you can't really be wasting Anthony Edwards' career like this. You want to give him a chance to move on to a Western Conference Finals again, and maybe move on even further to an NBA Finals after that. So we'll see what happens with that series. But for San Antonio, they move on to a big matchup series, the top 2 seeds in the West, as they take on the Oklahoma City Thunder. And then finally rounding it out, Johnson, we did have a Game 7 last night. It was Detroit and Cleveland. Before we get to Game 7, let's break down what happened in this series. Pretty much back and forth for the first couple of games in this series. The home team won the first 4 games of this series. Detroit going up 2-0 after 2 games. Then Cleveland tying the series with wins in Game 3 and Game 4. Then the Pistons pretty much looked like they were going to win game number 5. They had a 9-point lead with about 3 minutes left in that game. Unfortunately, they just choked it away towards the end, and the game went into overtime. A little bit of rough ball played into this game as well. The referees making some really, really questionable calls towards the end of regulation, and Piston fans obviously were not happy with that, and it really cost them that game. But they also missed some big shots also in that game 5, and the Cavaliers go into overtime and win that game by 4 points. They win their first road game of the entire postseason because they had lost all their road games the previous series against Toronto. So they win game 5. They go up 3-2 going back to Cleveland. They could not get the job done in game 6. A big win for Detroit on the road. And for both of these teams, they would go to their second straight game 7 because Detroit had to do it against Orlando in the first round. Cleveland had to do it against Toronto in the first round. And unfortunately for Detroit Johnson, it just seemed like the exhaustion, like we mentioned with Philadelphia earlier, it got to them in this game because the Cavaliers dominated pretty much from start to finish on this matchup. Donovan Mitchell was great. The Pistons really just did not have any offensive firepower whatsoever in this game. Cade Cunningham missed 7 3-pointers. Tobias Harris was having a pretty good postseason, and then he unfortunately looked like Tobias Harris from the last couple years. Jalen Duren had a horrific postseason, and he's probably going to get a max contract coming up. And
he might have cost himself a max contract here.
That's true. He might have cost himself that max contract. You never know. But big games from Mobley, Allen, Donovan Mitchell, and for James Harden, he didn't have a great game, but he got the monkey off his back. He finally wins a game 7. And his team
scored 9 points.
Finals.
9 big points on like 20% shooting.
Shots.
Yeah. Like, please.
But Donovan Mitchell at least gets the monkey off the back. He gets to his first Eastern Conference Finals.
He definitely earned it.
He earned it. Big game for Donovan Mitchell.
And now, if you're Detroit, congratulations, regular season Warriors. That was it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's a foundation there for Detroit. I think the problem for me, and I mentioned to you this last night, is that outside of Cade, which when he has his game, he's on. But when he's struggling, then you really worry. The Pistons don't really have, in my opinion, that number 2 guy that could save them from a bad Cade Cunningham game. Like, they don't have the number 2 guy on this team.
No, that's a fair... Listen, and Cade was exhausted. He had played almost 41 minutes a night, accounting for the stats of game number 7.
Right.
In 14 games. And the playoffs started a month ago. This guy played almost 41 minutes a night every other night. It's not sustainable. And he was exhausted. He didn't make a shot in the second half. And it is what it is. Detroit had no bench. And the only guy that showed up in game 7 was Danis Jenkins, who is at the beginning of his year, he was making like $200,000. He wasn't even a guaranteed player.
He was on a couple.
And Detroit was so cheap, they didn't even want to give him what he wanted. So, all around, very bad look for the Pistons franchise. But congratulations, you beat the Knicks in January and December. So we'll give you a golf clap for that. You won your Super Bowl 6 months ago.
And you look at the Pistons now going into the offseason. Tobias Harris is a free agent. Duncan Robinson would have to be a sign and trade, but he was big for them for the most part this season. Paul Reed had some big minutes for them in this playoffs, but did not have a really big game 7 either. But the big question is Duren with that extension, because keep in mind, they still wait to see if he gets All NBA or not. If he doesn't get the All NBA, his extension would be the maximum of $239 over 5 years. If he does get the All NBA selection, he'd be getting a 5-year extension for roughly $287 million. But then again, it comes down to what you say. Does he deserve it for what he did this playoffs? Because what was his best game? Maybe game 6 where he had 15 and 11?
Yeah, and that's not worth max extension money.
No.
If you're going to be a regular season Warrior, like, sorry, you're not worth it.
I don't know. I think Detroit's in a weird I keep saying it a lot, but they're in another interesting territory because you win 60 games. Obviously, this was an over-exceeding year. I said at the beginning of the year they'd be a top 3 seed. I didn't expect them to be the number 1 seed, but you have your 1A guy in Cade. you need someone to pair alongside Cade. And unfortunately, Jalen Duren is not a terrible player, but he cannot be your number two guy on paper. You need somebody be there with him. And as much as I love Danius Jenkins, right now he's not going to be the number two guy for you. He has to develop still. He's just a rookie at this point. You need somebody, and I don't know right now if there's a guy in free agency that can be that guy for you. So unless you're in the LeBron James sweepstakes, which I doubt it, but I don't know. I do not know what they do in this offseason. They have a very, very interesting offseason with the Duren extension talks, and then having to decide on some of their starting five players. Tobias Harris, as I mentioned, was in the starting five for the most of the year. Duncan Robinson had some starting minutes in this postseason as well. Yeah, I don't know. They have a very, very interesting offseason with a lot of questions as to what's going to be, the team outlook going into next season. Because right now, I don't think they can duplicate 60 wins again next year, but if they're going to try to do that, they have to make some roster moves. So we'll see. I did mention Johnson before we talk about the conference finals and previewing that. We did have the NBA draft lottery take place just almost, what was that, over a week ago? Last week. Yeah, just about a week ago. The Washington Wizards do get the number one overall pick in the NBA draft lottery. It's the first time since, I believe, 2018, if I'm not mistaken, that the team with the worst record in the league got the number one pick.
Yeah, and they have pretty much the equivalent of a number one pick, Alex Sarr, who was supposed to go number one, but said, "Hey, I'm not going to Atlanta." So
yeah,
and Alex Sarr is a pretty solid player. So he's not like number one pick wherever I think, but he's a solid starter.
Yeah, Washington's
they got some. They got some in there. They got they can get Dibanza. They're gonna have Trae Young. You have AD. You have Sarr. Right. You have you're gonna make the playoffs in the East.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there were a play-in team next year. Like, it would not be as fully surprised.
The bar is on the floor for them right now.
Right. But some other news from this draft, and there was a lot of teams that fell out and that fell down in this draft lottery. You look at, first off, the Jazz move up 2 spots. Memphis moved up 3 spots. Chicago moving up 5 spots. I thought for a second they were going to pull the heist of the century once again, and they get the number one overall pick, but that was not meant to be. The Indiana Pacers, biggest drop off for them. They dropped down to number 5. They're the number 2 overall pick odds wise, and they dropped to 5. And because of that, they lost their first round pick because their pick was top 4 protected with the Clippers. So you mentioned it earlier. The Clippers now have the number 5 overall pick in the draft. The Brooklyn Nets had the 3rd best odds. They dropped down to 6. The Sacramento Kings dropped down to 7. New Orleans was not going to have their pick regardless. Hawks will have the number 8 pick. Dallas will have number 9, and then the rest of the order follows as orders: Milwaukee, Golden State, OKC via Clippers, Miami, and Charlotte. And as we mentioned, Johnson, this is probably the most star-studded rookie class we have coming into in a very long time. This is a very loaded draft.
You can make arguments that all 4 of the top 4 guys could go number 1 over years.
Absolutely, no question.
Very rare that this happens.
I think, even, as much as it sucks for a team like Brooklyn to lose out on one of those top guys, it's going to suck that they're not going to get one of those guys, but even if they landed like a Darius Acuff at 6, like, it's still a pretty good consolation.
Oh, that's a good consolation prize, because that'd be like a number 2 or number 3 pick in every year. So
yeah, Acuff was one of my favorite players watching in the tournament this past March, and that would suck as a Knicks fan to see him be a Brooklyn Net. So hopefully they don't do that. But yeah, you have guys like Axel Lendenberg that might go maybe past number 10, but go to a team like either Golden State or OKC, which is absurd.
Yeah, he'd be like a guy getting picked 5 or 6 in other years.
Yeah. You look at even at the back end of the draft, there's still some really solid names. Joshua Jefferson was pretty good for Iowa State for most of the year. Alan Graves for Santa Clara. Koa Pete, who was big for Arizona this past season as well. Bennett Sturts from Iowa. Remember what he just did this past March too? Like, it's a really, really solid draft, and I'm looking very much forward to our mock draft that we'll have a little bit later on in the year and figure out who's going to be going where.
Yeah, Griggs is definitely an
Go from there.
analytics darling, which I kind of understand. But like, I wish I would have seen him against better competition in
Yeah,
college. But you can't get all your wishes. So
right. Yeah, he did have a nice game against Kentucky in the tournament, but that was pretty much outside of if you were watching that game or the
yeah, completely
WCC for
dominated
most of the
Kentucky.
year. But yeah, should be in a unbelievable draft coming up in the next couple of weeks. I'm looking very much forward to breaking all that down later in the year. But Johnson, it's now time for us to break down the final two matchups, or two of the last three final matchups for this NBA season. It's the Western and Eastern Conference Finals. Do we start in the East or the West? What do you want to start off with?
Let's start Knicks Cavs, Nick.
All right, let's
What do
start
you
off with the
got?
Knicks and the Cavs. 4 seed and the 3 seed. I think so. There's two parallels to this. I'll go into it quickly before I make my pick. Cleveland's had to play 14 games already this postseason. They have got to be really exhausted. And I felt like we saw what happened with Philadelphia immediately having to get 1 day of rest after playing game 7 and going to MSG. They just had no chance in that game. And I don't think that will happen to Cleveland that way. I think this will be an interesting series. But the last time we saw this series, the Knicks got them in 5 games. I think they do it again in 5 games. They got the New York Knicks winning this series in 5 and going to their first NBA Finals in over 2 decades.
I have the same thing, Nick. It's Knicks in fives. They're going to the finals. I had Cavs previously going to the East. I'm changing it to the Knicks.
Do you want to
I'm
hear
bought
what?
in.
Yeah, go on.
No, go. No, you please.
I was gonna make a Shannon Sharp joke. I don't know if you want me to make that on the air though. You know how he
Let's
does his
avoid
Lakers
the.
at fives thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Knicks in five. I get it. I get it. I get
Do you
it.
want me? Do you want me? I didn't make this up. Someone on Twitter made this up. Do you want me to tell you?
Sure, sure. You can recycle the Twitter joke.
James Harden, Granny's Garden, Kodak's Pardon, Nixon 5.
Hey, and there you have it, folks.
I couldn't stop laughing when I read that last night while reading comments after the Pistons Cavs game. But yeah, I got Knicks at 5. I think the exhaustion for Cleveland's gonna really get to them. And keep in mind, I mentioned it. OJ Anunoby didn't play the final 2 games against Philly. He is now fully healthy. The only thing that could go wrong for the Knicks is that they've had a long layover since that series ended and the end of the series with Cleveland and Detroit. I feel like maybe one of these first 2 games that might come back and haunt them. I think for the entire series, I don't think that will hurt them. I think once they get back into the groove of things after a game or two, then you'll see the team that we've been seeing so far in this postseason. I think they roll in this series and they move on to the NBA Finals and take on either the Oklahoma City Thunder and the San Antonio Spurs. Who do you have in that series?
I got Spurs in 7, Nick. Beat him 3 times in the regular season. Uh, Very deep team. I know OKC is deep as well. I'm gonna go with the known, and we know that during the regular season they were the better team. So let's stick with that, and let's see what happens here in the future.
Yeah, the Spurs were my pick at the beginning of the playoffs to be the Western Conference representative in the NBA Finals, but I did remember that at the beginning of the year, my NBA Finals prediction was the Knicks and the Thunder. I'm going to go back to my original preseason prediction. I'm going to have Knicks and Thunder in the NBA Finals. I also have this going into 7 games. I have OKC in 7 to take on the Knicks. However, keep in mind, I do want your matchup instead. I want Knicks and Spurs. I would rather have that matchup.
I do think the Knicks can beat the Spurs. I do not think they have a
Yeah,
chance whatsoever against the Thunder.
yeah, OKC is just very. I think in terms of depth, they have the better depth. Obviously, that's not really saying much. The Spurs, the only way the biggest way the Spurs can win this game and this series, and you've seen it during the regular season, is Wemby has to be Wemby. He has to do unearthly things and make sure that this team can thrive. And this team also has some deadly shooters. You know, Champagnie was big for them this year. Dylan Harper and Stephon Castle have really stepped up these last couple games in the playoffs. I think for purposes of maybe trying to jinx OKC for our sake, maybe I'll take the Thunder in 7 games as my preseason prediction. But I would obviously rather the Spurs in the finals. So we have Knicks and Spurs for you, Knicks and Thunder for me. I'm assuming we're both obviously picking against the Knicks because we're trying to help them.
Yeah, I'm still gonna pick the Spurs to win it all.
Spurs,
They're
yeah.
an excellent team. That's my preseason pick. I'm gonna stick with it.
The Spurs your preseason pick?
It's either
You had
preseason or
Rockets,
during the
Cavs.
Rockets Cavs. All right. So it's my
You're,
it's my all star pick. It's my all
I mean,
star
you have
pick.
one team still in there at least.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not a team you're
Listen.
going to root for now, but
No. Listen. I thought Cleveland would go far, and here they are. So
yeah. Yeah, I think what and we said it when they made the James Harden trade that would probably help them propel them into maybe getting a further step in the postseason. Um, yeah, I see it now. At our midseason deadline when we made the NBA trade deadline pod, you had Pistons and Spurs, so you were close on
yeah.
that
So
one.
Spurs midseason pick, and Pistons a little bit further off, but
And I had Cavs and OKC, so that's still obviously a hypothetical that could work out, but I'm hoping that's not what happens. Um, I have Thunder winning against the Knicks because of obvious reasons. We'll see what happens. But yeah, Johnson, we're getting down to the nitty gritty. It's getting down to the very thin end of this NBA season. I think what for us now? 2 more pods left in the NBA season. We have
and then we're done.
or technically 3. We're going to have the conference finals recap. We'll have an NBA finals recap, and then the last pod before next season will be the NBA draft pod that will break down what happened in free agency, and then we'll also break down who we think the NBA teams will be picking in this upcoming NBA draft. So we're almost done with the NBA season. It's crazy to think that that is the case. It's been a wild NBA ride so far, and we'll see how these conference finals go. As I mentioned, Game 1 kicks off tonight between San Antonio and OKC, and then tomorrow night it is Cleveland and New York in the Eastern Conference Finals. But that's going to do it for this week's edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. We started with all these teams in this NBA postseason. Of course, 8-8 at each side, but we also had some play-in teams as well. But we're now down to the Final Four. In the West, it is the top 2 seeds, the Oklahoma City Thunder and the San Antonio Spurs. In the East, it's the number 3 seeded New York Knicks and the number 4 seeded Cleveland Cavaliers, who will win their respective conference finals and move on to the NBA finals. Once those series finish, Johnson and I will be back here on the show to recap the conference finals and then break down and predict who will win the Larry O'Brien NBA championship. For Nicholas Pavone and Andrew Johnson, this has been the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Have a great rest of your week.